Whenever you're ready, Lou.
Okay, well, I kind of want to start off first of all by introducing myself. My name is Lou Rosenbaum. Um, I have mostly in my life been a bookseller. I've been in the league since its foundation. I've been a teacher and a writer, and so that's where I come from. I've been involved in education work. I've been involved in a number of different areas of activity over the years that I've been active in the movement. But at this point, at the age that I am, I'm in my upper 70s. Compromised by the pandemic. I'm spending most of my time, as they say, as a keyboard warrior. Um, ah, um, what can I say? Okay, that's my background. Um, and Hissa will introduce herself. I don't want to take it away from her on that. She will follow me in this discussion. We'll then open it up for general discussion on the topic of the day, which is after the elections. Um, and we're using as a base the material that was sent out along with the link to get in here, much of which was league material, some of which was not. Some of it was from Truth Out and some other places as well. Um, what's the purpose of what we're doing today? What we're trying to do here is that the Chicago area of the league is taking an opportunity to get into the mix of revolutionaries who are discussing the current electoral situation and the path forward. And we're trying to bring revolutionaries together so that we can share experiences and we can all better understand the situation that we face. So, for some of you, the LRNA may be relatively new, the league may be relatively new. We're League of Revolutionaries for New America is a national organization. Our members are active in numerous battles around the country, from healthcare to union work to housing to education and a whole bunch of other things. All the battles for basic needs that you can imagine. Um, from within those battles, we strive to elevate the individual struggle so that scattered economic struggles unite into political struggles. And we don't necessarily just mean electoral, but certainly in the current environment, electoral is one of the ways, one of the chief ways in which people are attempting to make their demands known. We say we're an organization of propagandists, and that means that we recognize we're in a situation that has never existed before. Excuse me. And that a growing group within the working class is being permanently separated from the ability to earn a living. They're in a position that makes them vulnerable, but it also makes it impossible for them to achieve their goals without obtaining housing for all,
Hmm.
without reorganizing society in the interest of all. They're in a position of having to demand the distribution of goods to all according to need. They are the revolutionaries in society today, not some ideological grouping, but because they have no choice. We're here today because of the fact that in the last couple of years, and accelerated by the pandemic, working class leaders have entered the fray of electoral politics to bring the demands of the people to the halls of Congress, the state houses, and city halls. And we've seen that in Chicago, where a number of political leaders or working class leaders have fought to get electoral positions in the city of Chicago, and where the working class has fought to get them in power. One of the chief examples of that in the last two election cycles, 2016 and 2020, was the Kim Foxx um, battle. First of all, to oust Anita Alvarez as state's attorney, and secondly to retain her position against this guy Pat O'Brien, who's probably to the right of Attila the Hun. So it's in that kind, and she was supported by a wide coalition of people, including Black Lives Matter activists, including excuse me, the people who were involved in the fight for a civilian oversight for the police.
Mm-hmm.
So for many people, the local elections are even more important than the presidential elections. Nevertheless, the turnout for this presidential election was overwhelming. And currently, the main topic of discussion has been, will Trump succeed in his attempted coup? There's a number of things that have come out recently. Just you know, the attempts to sway a number of states legislators to choose an alternate group of electors, Republican electors, even though the states voted for Democratic electors. So these kinds of things are going forward. There is a distinct fascist danger, and certainly only one aspect of it is the attempted coup. There are serious questions about whether it can be accomplished, but that doesn't make the threat less serious.
Mm-hmm.
Because lurking in the background, there are two other but related dangers. One is the fact that in the last 4 years, a social base for fascism has been built, which will continue regardless of the outcome. The Proud Boys are only the most widely known elements of this. Uh, and of course, just to the north of us in Kenosha, we had the example of this guy, Kyle Rittenhouse, uh, shooting one of the killing a couple of protesters, and just putting up $2 million in bail. So it's clear that these forces are still there and they're organizing. Um, but the other danger, and maybe the more permanent danger, the more important one in some ways, are the fascist and pinstriped suits on Wall Street in both parties. Were also making their moves. They all rely on history of this country, and the history, as James Baldwin once said, it's not just in the past, but in the present all around us. And that history of racism is something that's really that fundamental in the class struggle that we're facing. So that's all I want to say to start out with, and I want to turn it over to Hasid to take over.
Thank you. And I just want to say, if you have questions at all about anything we're talking about, feel free to put them in the chat. You know, so I'm taking a more practical approach. My name is Jesus Estrada. And first of all, I thank you for coming on a Saturday afternoon. I know a lot of people are getting zoomed out and zoom exhausted, but I think it's important that we continue to have these kinds of conversations. I'm a college professor. I teach English at Harold Washington College, but I also run my union chapter. I have about 300 members of faculty, part-time professionals, full-time professionals, and security officers, or retired police officers. And I actually, I came more to learn from all of you, to hear what your experiences are, um, and with this fundamental question of what comes next, right? Or ideally, what should come next? And so, like I said, a lot of sectors have been having these kinds of conversations in the classroom. We had this conversation yesterday at a House of Delegates meeting, but their focus was, what can the union do? What should be their priorities, that they need to put their efforts, right? And so we're a small union. We have like 5,000 members, but we work hard on campaigns. We work very hard to elect a number of those progressive alder persons, and also senators and whatnot, and actually have allies, right, in who are progressive officials. And so we also offer financial support and boots on the ground. But so we're having this conversation, and out of my idealistic mouth, right? Because I've been thinking about the divide that this country is, and the danger that we're in, right? Because I think if 73 million people voted for Trump, that was like 47.2. I think I said it was in great part because of economic insecurity. And yes, there is a growing fascism. Yes, there are racists. But I think about farmers who voted for Trump. I think about communities that are devastated by the coronavirus that voted for Trump. I think about Mexicanos in Texas who overwhelmingly voted for Trump and other groups. And it's true that Trump has exacerbated or really brought to light this historic racism, misogyny, um, xenophobia, fascism, right? But I think that those sectors of the population voted for Trump in great part because they wanted their economic needs met. They want their kids to go to college. They're worried about their jobs. Yes, they're scapegoating immigrants for the state of the economy, but somehow or other, they believe that Trump was good for the economy, right? So I said we need to meet the needs of people, look beyond our union, and lift all the boats up. And it's not that the idea it didn't go over very well. I just think that we're in a really dangerous time, and I don't think having Biden in office is going to breach these two sectors. So, but what the union did want to do, because they were like, yeah, it was, I don't know, they just didn't seem like they were going for that. What they said was they wanted to do more practical work in the electoral process, and it was more important to aim for local goals. So, the elected school board campaign, which doesn't seem like it would be anti-racist or anti, poverty, actually would be, because if we had an elected school board in the city colleges, we could implement programs that are serving communities of color and the South and West Side, right? We could aim for actual goals that serve the interests of students. And so that's where I think they're going to funnel a lot of the energy, but they wanted something, more practical. But within that conversation, they also raised other things that are really dear and near to my heart that I do want politicians to focus on, right? So we talked about reforming the police. They talk about it in reform because the other terms are a little too controversial, but within the context of holding police accountable, having actual oversight committees. We talked about addressing racism and segregation in the city, and also about having free higher education, which may sound like a radical idea, but we've been talking about this in the American Federation of Teachers and the Illinois Federation of Teachers. But this is the first time that we actually articulated this as a goal for our union, which is pretty awesome, right? We talked about meeting the needs of students, especially those that have food and housing insecurity, and then having absolute debt forgiveness. For that last one, I almost fell out of my chair because I'm not saying that our union's conservative, but the fact that they were putting forth these practical needs and agreeing wholeheartedly, that was something different, right? And it also gave me a lot of hope. So these are the goals that the union has in mind, that they're going to fight for. We also talked about running candidates, which we've never done before, right? Like really practically running, training, raising the money to run candidates to meet our class interests, and I thought that was pretty amazing. Something they didn't talk about, but I think is at the forefront of everybody. What do we want these politicians to do, right? Now that they're in office, I want to see actual science-based research, science-based doctors that are going to have a plan when it comes to the coronavirus. And I was talking to Lou yesterday. I don't think they have one, right? But as an educator who's seeing the cases rise among students and workers, this is something that's crucial, right? That I want our politicians to address. I just want to talk real briefly about the fair tax. As you're familiar, many of you here in Illinois, we had this opportunity to pass a fair tax that our union put a lot of time into. A lot of the members voted for it. There was this opportunity to raise like $7 billion of revenue, and that could have gone to higher ed, public services. But the wealthy in the state did a really good job of propagandizing against it. Now, people in Illinois are going to be in for a real wake up call because taxes are going to go up. They're already talking about taxing retiree income. We're worried about our pensions, and we're going to be living under austere measures, right? So that it's going to make life very difficult in Illinois, and it's already hard for people. And I was, oh man, I woke up that morning and saw that it hadn't passed. I was so devastated. But it's not an answer to poverty, but it would have really helped, especially since we've been living in these terrible conditions when they cut mental health services, when they cut higher ed funding. So that's what I mean, those are a few of the things, but I frame that in terms of what I want to see as an educator. Um, and I want to hear from you. Where do you think we should go from here? what do you think politicians should do to serve you? Oh, somebody has a question. Donna says people who believe he supports anti-abortion efforts voted for him. Absolutely, yeah, that's yeah, for sure. Um, but the Catholic vote was interestingly split, right? So I don't think they were completely. Hey, Misael, how are you? So I guess we can open up the conversation.
Can I say something?
Absolutely, man, go for it.
Um, I believe so. I've been, reading and watching videos, just kind of seeing what to expect. Um, I have friends on social media who are pro-Trump, and they're Latinos. You know,
Yep.
I don't, I don't, I don't, I don't. We don't engage in this where we're friending each other, stuff, trying to argue. It's purely that we have been able to make for each other. But I'm not in it. I'm sorry, there's a helicopter over now. Um, there's one thing that I don't understand about what the left is doing. If they are not going to settle for for not like it's like I feel like everything's okay now, and I know that's not true because there's a lot of like pending issues that we want to know about, but nobody's actually taking initiative to organizing like a pro-immigrant freedom movement where they feel people that are still engaged. So like, for me, like I really would like to set that motive a priority because by doing this, it's a big victory. And I was kind of saying that what if we took it to the extent that we have for these children that are in like scholarships or something to universities? And I don't think that should be a priority because the symbolic would status quo in a radical way. So I'm gonna go ahead and mute myself now because I know
So
that's
let me see if
my.
I capture because you were breaking up a lot. You were saying that we need to prioritize immigrant rights. Is that what I heard? Of undocumented students.
Um, well, well, yes, yeah, yeah. But I was thinking more like the children incarcerated. That we prioritize freedom, liberation, or some like a network movement for these kids. Like it should be our priority. That's how I feel. Like they should be in them. Like that's another, like I think that would be a symbolic um for the work.
Can you do me a favor, Mijo? Can you chat out what you just said? Because you broke up a lot. I caught like 10% of that. But I think you're talking about having scholarships for, well, chat it,
Oh,
type it in the chat. Because it's hard to understand because it's
okay.
breaking up quite a bit. But awesome. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Rand, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry that all you get is my Zoom B. My video camera isn't working real well, and this picture that I have up there is probably a better portrayal. I'm out here in the rural area of Michigan, and one of the things we see as a result is the polarity around the election. We talk about events in the urban area and what the urban think, but here in the coastal highway from Michigan near Benton Harbor coming north, the Sunday before the elections, people's Biden signs were being blasted with shotguns. They went so far
Wow.
north of South Haven before they ran out of shells. Um, Sheriff's Department's response, basically, those that have been daring enough even to make a complaint, it's just pranksters. But Sunday before, let's see, the Thursday before the last, after the elections, where the signs had been and or where they still were with their holes from the shotgun, it was their mailboxes now. This is a hell of a message. And if those have been following Michigan politics and the role of the right, you can see that it's not going to let up. It's going to become more polarized in the rural area. And why I mention the rural area is in an urban area, you know, if you have a crime, you know, like you fisticuffs or something, there's a lot of witnesses. But in the rural area, you're lucky to even hear the shotgun blast, let alone know what's going on. And there's a number of people I just, you know, surmise are, particularly these victims of the shotgun blast, are largely older folks that have retired along the lakeside. This is a real message to them, whether or not they even will dare put another sign out in the future. The polarity. So, you know, I just say that pay attention to what's going on, because whether, you know, Biden gets into office and what actions he might take, this organized section of the right is still present. And I would just point to Kalamazoo, Michigan, on August 15th of the past, the Proud Boys were counter demonstrated and virtually was escorted back to their cars by the city police as the local progressive demonstrators basically were chasing them down after them being threatened by their guns. So they're not willing to take the intimidation in the urban areas. But the difference here is they were largely young people that were already organized progressives. Whereas on the lakeside of Michigan, these are people that traditionally believe in the democratic process and their right to put a sign out. And now they've got a bad message.
Yeah. Can I get on stack? Cause my sister-in-law and her husband, they have a business in Milwaukee. And you remember when they had the uprising after the death of that, was it? I mean, they all start to sound the same after a while. But what happened is that there were fires and his business got burned down. And Trump wanted to meet with him, and he refused. He didn't. They didn't. The business partner didn't want to meet with Trump. They didn't. You want to use that as a symbol to demonize the Black Lives Matter movement and what have you. And people started calling them on the phone with death threats. And these are regular Trump supporters. These aren't the Proud Boys or whatever. It terrified my sister-in-law, you know, and to the point that she was going to go to another state. But that I think too was terrifying. So what I said to her, because during this pandemic, you got to find allies to unite with. You got to let it be known that these cowards are threatening you on the phone, you know, because she couldn't really either. She was in that situation where they didn't feel comfortable reaching out to the cops, and luckily, you know, they're still safe. But that's real, you know. Um, okay, so inside says liberating immigrant children from cage facilities should be absolutely. I agree 100%. Should be a priority. It would be a symbolic victory for the working class. It would also push for reparations in the form of tuition scholarships for children. Ah, okay, that's different than what I similar though. Awesome. Good, excellent. Somebody else want to jump in, talk about the rural divisions or this issue that Misa had raised?
This is Lou. I'll just throw in a few words here. I think the question of liberating the kids is really important. I mean, we know now that there are over 500 families, 500 kids that for whom they have no idea where their families are, and that's criminal. And we need to understand that as bad, but the history of this country in terms of separating families goes back to the slave days. I mean, so much of what we experience today arises from the history that we have, um, that predates the Civil War, and that is connected to that. I also wanted to say that ICE and that whole deportation enforcement is a special section of the police. And so when we see demands being raised to defund the police and abolish the police, it means something. It means that also for things like ICE and the deportation um, network. And it means more than just abolish or defund. It means really reorganize society. So I think that these are the kinds of demands that are being made that are significantly different from what we've seen even a year ago. I mean, I know the defund the police and the abolition movement has been around for a while, but after George Floyd was murdered and after the kids were put in these cages, the whole, the demands to defund and abolish became much more urgent and much more programmatic, much more, less ideological, if you will. That it really became connected to something that could be done and could help in reconstituting society in a way that we, the people, could benefit from it. So that's all I have to say.
Can I say a word here?
Yeah.
Go for it, Dave.
Thank you. Just on the back of the defund the police demand, I think we have to realize too that with Biden as president, we're probably looking at more wars. One thing that Trump didn't do was start any new shooting wars. He did start economic warfare, intensify economic warfare against 40 countries, I guess. He's got sanctions on 40 countries. But Biden and the crew that he is assembling, including Susan Rice and others, are traditional warmongers. And so I think that another thing that has to be considered is a new peace movement, because it's not just defunding the police who are attacking us, but defunding the military who are attacking our brothers and sisters who are doing the same thing as us in other countries. Trying to rise up to demanding that they be given basic human rights, demanding housing, clean water, and all the things that we want, that we're demanding, they're demanding, and we traditionally react to them with guns, with weapons and warfare. So I think somehow we have to begin to widen our view here in the belly of the beast to include our brothers and sisters in other theaters that are fighting against the same enemy that we're fighting against. Just wanted to raise that question. Thank you.
Good point.
This is Kenny for Stack.
Go ahead, Kenny.
Yeah, I think what Dave's saying is important too. Framing of some of the language too, like defund has been around for a long time and it's gained momentum, especially I think in urban areas, where police violence is so much more a part of the community on a daily basis. But I also think like outside of urban areas, maybe defund isn't connecting as much with people, and as maybe like what comes to my mind is like refund. So refunding communities, you know, bringing resources back to communities, and of course that should come away from the policing communities. But in small towns where like a sheriff is, you know, such a key part of the town, politically, is going to be it's difficult to make that case for defunding when they're like held high on a pedestal. The other piece I liked that I was thinking about with David's comment was around the peace, like increasing a movement for peace, because, you know, I'm curious if the warmongers who are being reappointed into positions of power, if the wealthy and people in power are going to use a military, you know, take steps in military action to, you know, increase profits and make money for money that, well, while the wealthy haven't necessarily been losing money in the pandemic, you know, as the crisis of capitalism continues to spin out of control, are they going to use military actions as, you know, like they did, like they have in the past, to increase their corporate bank accounts? And is that what's happening as, you know, the transition teams and Biden puts these people in place and back into power?
Also, just some comment on that. They don't want any good examples. We see how China defeated the virus, how Vietnam defeated the virus, how Cuba's got it under control, developing their own vaccine, Venezuela. These countries are developing. China has high-speed rail. They don't want to see another model exist in the world that is better than ours, that is more successful than ours, that people may look to as an example. I just want to add that. Thank you.
Juanita, do you want to say a few? Juanita's a historian, and among other things. But you said there's a contemporary peace and solidarity movement. What were your thoughts on that?
I just appreciate the comments about needing to think about the peace movement again, and also Kenneth's thoughts about, is the United States going to react militarily to countries that will, you know, implement some policies that are going to be threatening to all of the U.S. interests that exist throughout, obviously, the world. When I heard these comments, I was thinking, wow, it's kind of like we have Ronald Reagan in there again, because we might get to the point of the administration being willing to go to that extent. You know, as you know, Jesus, I study Latin America, and so I actually focus on U.S. Latin America relations. And when I think about all of the interventions, not just in the 1980s, but starting back in, you know, the turn of the century, and I wonder if we might see that kind of intervention start again. But I do think that if they do that, it's definitely going to be done with proxy force, which means that our US population, the majority, or a lot of people aren't going to be aware of it. And so it's going to mean needing to educate people on what has happened in the past and the potential for what could happen in the future. Because obviously since, you know, 1965, I mean, other than 1989, the US didn't really go in directly in Latin America, but they were definitely responsible for everything that happened since then. So I just think that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent points. So we have a couple of comments. We see Steve says the white nationalists are arming up to intimidate opposition. They have political spokespeople and soldiers to execute their agenda in the streets. Our opposition to them must equal their willingness to intimidate the weak and oppressed. We need to build a counterforce to their aggression against people. Steve, what does that look like?
I guess the model that I have in my head is what the IRA did in Ireland to protect themselves against the British, where they had a political arm that ran for office and developed policies in Ireland. And they had a political arm that put together actions that brought their message to the powerful that they were serious.
All right, and then that's an interesting. I think I'd like to talk more about that. But Rand says that most rural communities are without funds to support local police. They have reduced police service to the point that folks take the law into their own hands. A wider level of unreported crimes. Police response are over a half hour in a small community is common. And then Misael says that we need a powerful symbolic victory for the world. The U.S. sets a model that third world countries follow. ICE will make a move together. Chinese or possible Middle Eastern folks, depending on the location of war, pushing for freedom movement will send smoke signals to other countries. So okay, a lot to work with here. Um, I was in a. It surprised me, Kenny. I was gonna speak to this. I was in Palouse over the summer. I don't know if you ever went to Palouse. It's a very uh, organic kind of community, and what happened there was that almost every household had a Black Lives Matter sign. They were having conversations about this. They were talking about abolishing the police because they had a police chief and a deputy who was getting like 75% of the, or something like that, like a really high amount of the budget that was meant for the town, you know? And so I was shocked, rural area, right? But what they were discovering was that, or the fundamental question they were asking was, why are we giving so much money to this guy who harasses young people? They don't actually solve any crimes. There are practically no crimes in Palouse. Why aren't they using that money to fund the school, or towards public services? Because they also had a very healthy food pantry to meet the needs of people, right? And I know sometimes they were saying, oh, because they were also besides the Black Lives Matters that were pro Trump, posters that they would see the pro Trumpers come and get food, right? And they were cordial, but the point was that these people were suffering, that they could have also benefited from defunding the police and spreading the wealth according to need. But it was a fascinating thing to me to see, because I also had this idea, oh well, in rural towns they're not taking up this banner, but they were. And I don't think it's necessarily that they're close to a college town. Well, maybe it does influence. I was just surprised, like everywhere we went, Black Lives Matter, and so that was really, to me, that was a good sign, literally. But
Yeah,
Where
this is
was that,
Lou.
Jesus?
in Palouse, Washington, of all places, it's a small community outside of Pullman.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah, but it was amazing, and it wasn't just like people were putting up the signs; they were actually having real city hall battles about these things, right? Um, it was good. They may think it was small, but it wasn't. Even I guess the pro Trumpers were gonna have a parade, and the citizens of Pools stopped it. You know, just like it was awesome. A lot of shit talking on Facebook, but they did it. It was
Mm-hmm.
great.
Oh, wow. Okay.
This is Lou. Just to say a few things here. I think we shouldn't look at urban areas or rural areas as monolithic. Um, when we look at the map of Texas, for example, it looks all red, but it's not. 46% of the people voted for what's his name, and 54% voted for Trump. So it's not, and it's not just the big cities. It's not just Houston or Austin or Dallas. That there are places throughout that there are enclaves of people that are that understand what we're talking about when you say defund and have experience with with rural police um, organizations that are targeting young people, like Jesus said, um, or targeting poor people. Uh, One of my friends in Southern Illinois tells me that the harassment of young people and poor people by the cops in Southern Illinois is pretty serious, uh, and is not taken lightly. So I think there are possibilities, particularly around the question, recognizing what are the, what could be accomplished by um, taking funding that the police don't need. I mean, they don't solve crimes, that for the most part, they don't. So what are they getting paid to do? And if they're getting paid to do mental health checks, then that's not what they should be doing, and so forth and so on. That's really I mean, that's one of the key things that we see over and over again with police shootings is that they come in with uh, for a mental health check and kill the person that is supposed to be who is having these problems. So anyway, I want to say that. The other thing I wanted to say is in terms of this international process under the Obama administration, and maybe even before that, but certainly under the Obama administration, it became very clear that the United States was pivoting to a containment of China and as its primary uh, strategic initiative because it saw China's rapidly advancing economy, understood that. And clearly today, China is challenging the United States as no other economy has. Um, and part of what we see is in Africa and in Latin America, where China is making inroads by developing capital projects, doing various kinds of things that the United States is not interested in doing. And so I think the the interventions that we're going to see might take that form as well. And certainly with the proxy wars that have been fought in Latin America over the last period of time, certainly very clear. But I think Dave's point about not wanting to have any example of what could be done better. For God's sake, the pandemic has so clarified, ought to have so clarified that, except that we have our people in this country have no idea really that China has wiped out the virus for the most part. They have no idea that certain countries have wiped out the virus. And it's not even socialist countries necessarily. I mean, Taiwan has wiped out the virus. South Korea has wiped out the virus. Uh, the very fact that our country is number one. I mean, America is number one. We've made America great again as far as the virus is concerned. It's everywhere, and it is worse than ever. And obviously, the highest case fatalities in the world. So, um, uh, I guess I'm going to leave it at that.
Brandon's on stack.
Yeah, thank you, Juanita, by bringing up I don't want to get too much into foreign policy, but the third force idea. And that started with Secretary Dulles, if we can all remember back to the development of the Cold War and the Berlin Wall and such. But I'd like to point to Ethiopia. They've got a big ass dam. They're filling it up. And their neighboring countries that are downriver are getting all pissed off. And now, within the last week or so, you suddenly see, I don't know what the word best describes it, but warfare of some sort occurring in their northern provinces near near Eritrea. And it's no doubt, given their proximity to the Sudan, which has had a great concern about the dam, as well as Trump saying that they're all within their right to intervene militarily if they can't get a resolution of filling up this dam, is developing. You know, this is a war example that you had brought up, I think, or military action of some sort that fits neatly into your description, though may be much more messy on ground because of the different ethnic considerations in the area and history. But we're going to see a lot more of this, you know.
And Steve, you got your hand up?
Yeah. I just want to say to Lou and to Ron, who just spoke, that you both are raising valid points about what's taking place around us. But I feel that we need to focus on the home base and focus on the United States in order to be able to get our response to the world as united as possible. And one of the ways that I think that we can do this in our own communities is to focus on budgets, focus on what municipal, what happens in your counties, what I'm trying to say. It's like, where does your county money go? When you pay your county real estate taxes, where does that money go? Who's getting the lion's share of that money? And to be able to bring pressure to control and to influence how that money is spent will get results in local communities. And I give you an example. I live in Villa Park, Illinois. Villa Park was given $1,100,000 from the CARES Act that was given to DuPage County. DuPage County was the only county in Illinois that received direct money from the CARES Act, and they got $160 million of money to use within their county to help them mitigate the effects of the virus. And if you ask local leaders what they've been doing with that money, like I have here in Villa Park, they couldn't tell you. All that they have told me from one-on-one conversations is that, well, they're using it to supplement what they already budgeted for in their planning for 2021. And to me, they're missing a great opportunity to be able to help local communities by having non-violent ways to invest that money in their communities to help the people that are suffering. And that's just one example. There's 38 municipalities in DuPage County. And this is just one municipality where I live in, that I know that if I keep asking the hard questions to the locals, eventually they're going to say something stupid and embarrass themselves because they don't know and they don't have a coherent plan to deal with it. And I think that presents an opportunity to us. It presents an opportunity to basically promote policy agendas that could work in municipalities to take money that would ordinarily be thrown at police departments. Like the county sheriff's office had gotten $150,000 just to buy ammunition for the county. Do they really need $150,000 worth of ammunition? You know, for 1 year? It's like, it's amazing, which is why I believe that if more people focused on where the money goes and how it's spent and where it comes from, that we would have more control over what takes place in our own local regions. So one county can influence a state can influence the country. And I believe that is something concrete that we all can take part in.
No, those are
That's
excellent.
all I want to say.
You know, and the other thing too, Steve, like one of the things that I find so compelling is that they have found all this money, right, that they've given to different communities. Like we got millions of dollars too for the city colleges, and our union is actually in a battle just to be allowed to see how much money and how it's being allocated. And the city's fought us. We have to go to arbitration now. But suddenly they had money for technology. They had money for free Wi-Fi, right? And we found money for, which is brilliant. It's great. We found money for undocumented students that perhaps weren't going to get CARES money. Why can't that money be available after the pandemic? Right. And I think you're right. There's a lot of irresponsibility when it comes to budgeting. And that is outrageous. How much money for bullets, Steve? Was it?
Well, I know DuPage County got $160 million, and
Right.
every municipal entity in DuPage County got a portion of that. The reason I know Villa Park got $1,100,000 plus is because that's where I live. So
Right.
that's where I focus on.
No. Yeah, very good. Somebody else? Go ahead, David. Are you getting on stack? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that that we want to show the connections between the local, the state, and the federal and the international. Because I was reading that 53% of the local budget goes to the police, 54% of the international budget goes to the military.
Mm-hmm.
So and just think if we had that, and we know that to get out of this coronavirus situation, we need federal dollars. Here in the state of Michigan, our Governor Whitmer has complained we can't get any, and I've been watching New York too. We can't get the federal dollars to do what we need to do to recover and deal with this coronavirus. Where is it all going? It's going to war. And just as capitalism needs to get that surplus value from the workers that it cannot get anymore, imperialism needs to be able to extract those raw materials and make super profits from these other countries and as well. So it's all one system, it's all intersection. But there's another point I want to raise that I think that we haven't really talked about, and that's focusing on what Jesus was saying, small business. I think we need to support small business. A lot of the people that support Trump say, oh, the federal government's going to control everything. We won't have any more freedom. Well, a lot of our friends and family who are workers, they take their skill set and they open up a little business. Everybody wants to do that. It's better than working for somebody else. And a lot of the innovation and entrepreneurship comes from small business. A lot of the socialist countries and other countries are supporting small business. Cuba just now made a big change in withdrawing subsidies to restaurants and small businesses. So I think if we began to talk about small business, what it is, how workers are starting small businesses, how it's a place for innovation, we would take a lot of the wind out of the Trumpster sails. And not only that, we would have more resources for our movement because a lot of the people that own small businesses have resources that can help us and that will be our allies. So I think that's something that really hasn't been talked about that really should be considered. Thank you.
Good point.
June says that as a professor of justice studies and criminal justice, I am seeing more students interested in socialism, defunding and abolishment on one hand, and students who are police and correction officers questioning what they're doing more than ever. A focus on budgets and funding is critical, and organized pressure to refund, as one of you said. And I would say for conservation corps type groups, counter institutions and mutual aid groups could create jobs, and provisional institutions to replace all the functions this corrupt institution is mismanaging now. June, could you speak more to this? I'm curious. What is this conservation course?
Oh, do you remember the Conservation Corps of, the Depression era? This has come up in the, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, great. This has come up in my classes actually before, of pressuring the government to create these kinds of, programs, especially for out of work young people and people who are going to be graduating, and, like the focus on county and city budgets. We need to take a look at, creating new pots of money for the kinds of counter institutions that we would like to see built. And that has happened before. And I think the model is out there, and we could reintroduce that model, especially with the pandemic. But I also am seeing my students be very interested in creating counter institutions and mutual aid groups right now, like never before. And another point I want to make is Lou was absolutely right. The statistics are that the number of cases that cops are actually closing and solving is, not at all impressive. And so, I mean, we have, I teach criminal justice at Colorado State University, and, those students who are cops and correction officers are really lost right now. They don't really know what their purpose is, because the drug war, the drugs have won the drug war, so it's like, what are they about, and what is their focus? So I do think that across the board, from conservatives to liberal and left students, you are seeing, young people reconsider some ideas that they have not been willing to even look at in my over 30 years of teaching.
Yeah. No, I'm seeing the same thing with my students.
Yeah.
And in fact, I pitched this for them as extra credit because they're really interested in politics. And one of the students, he didn't say he was socialist, but what he was really questioning, he's like, well, I see this as a metaphor. You have the Republican and the Democrats, and in the end, they're going to do the same thing. I don't see them as any different. And the thing is that even though a lot of the students had voted for Biden, they didn't argue against that. In fact, I was surprised because I wasn't surprised. I've had entire groups of students who were, the whole class, who were Bernie supporters and had absolutely no problem talking about socialist concepts or self-identified as socialist because of one, what they and their families were struggling with. Right. But to them, it's not such a reactionary thing to talk about these ideas.
Right.
And I don't know, Juanita, if this has been your experience. Had I tried to have this conversation 10 years ago, it would have been hard,
Oh, absolutely. But I think it really is the time, if we don't try to seriously organize, especially as institutions, groups like the League, and, it has to be about organizing. That's why I think mutual aid and counter institutions are so important, especially if somehow we can pressure groups to give money, so that we have these young people who are interested actually get some jobs out of this, Yeah. One of the things that I do just before I, stop talking is in many of my classes, their final project is to create a group. They have to create a group, around social change and, whether it's violence against women or whether it's anti-war or whether it's freeing migrants from cages, they have to create a, strategic plan for a group. And I think this is critical that, we pass, that these kind of toolkits and models along.
Yeah, that's excellent. What a great project. Sorry, I was just saying that was another thing I didn't talk about. Lou, you're still on. Anybody else? How about somebody who hasn't had a chance to speak? Donna, I don't know. I know you were a retired teacher. If you have any thoughts about what you think regarding the elections, and we don't have to agree. We didn't talk about that. It's okay to have different ideas.
I was just here mostly to listen. I mean, I was shocked seeing on Facebook how many people support Trump wholeheartedly and everything, and I just couldn't get my head around it.
Yep.
And, you know, so I was just interested in what you guys were saying.
No, I agree, and that's what I was trying to kind of push my union to think about. What are we going to do to bring people together, right? What kind of fighting union are we going to be? And I wish, God, it's just a conundrum. I have a difficult time with Trump supporters. And I have a real immediate visceral reaction where I just unfriend them, which is probably not the most proactive thing to do. But then, how do we talk to them in a way that indicates what kind of political system will meet their interests, right? And I don't know, but it's hard. It's really difficult. Um, yeah. It,
This is
I
new.
wonder though, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I wonder how much effort should be put into talking to Trump supporters, and how much should we maybe focus more on people who are realizing that the Democratic Party is not going to do anything for them?
yeah. No, you're right on point, sister. Right on. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
Because that's the change I see in my students. Is my students used to be about, well, if we could just get the Republicans out. But now I have students who really are and very well articulated, making arguments for why neither party's going to do it. So
Yep. Yeah, that's why I'm sorry, Lou, you were on stack. I was gonna go ahead, Lou.
Yeah, I think that's a really important. I think we have to understand tactics and strategy. The two different things. Tactically, at this point, we've got to be where we are, and where we are is largely among those 74, 75, 76 million people who voted for Biden. And those who didn't vote at all. I mean that's where we are. We're not among the, for the most part, among the arena of Trump voters.
Sure.
But that doesn't mean that we can't get there. But we certainly have got to go with where we are, and not from the point of view that the people who are the Biden voters agree with us, but from the point of view that the ones we're dealing with are the active people, like the students that Juanita was talking about, who who understand what the problem is that they've got to organize against and for, and that's the beginning. But at the same time, we have to recognize, and I use this example over and over again. In 2016, in the primaries, in the Democratic Party primaries, every county in West Virginia voted for Bernie Sanders. And in the general election, every county voted for Trump. It's not just that there were more Trumpers than there were Sanders people. There were, in fact, there was a recognition that Clinton did not really respond to the needs of the working class, and the hope, the kind of thing that Juanita was saying was that they recognized that the Democrats were not giving them what they needed, had abandoned them, and that's fairly regular within all of the red country. What we call the red country is the Democrats have abandoned them, and Wall Street has abandoned them. That's true, but to the difficulty is when people grasp at straws and think that because Wall Street has abandoned them, that means that Donald Trump is going to protect them.
Yeah.
That binary kind of approach is not going to solve the problem, and that's where we have to get to ultimately to those folks. There are people in our classes and in our neighborhoods who have the language that can appeal to and speak to that group of people. We just need to reach them. That's all.
Yeah. I was just, was commenting. Anybody else?
This is Lou, one more time, one more thing. I just want to affirm what June was saying. I mean, I don't have classes, so I can't tell that. But the last 6 months has been a period since the pandemic. So the last 9 months, and certainly since June with the George Floyd rebellion, this has been a period in which I've not experienced a period like this before, and I've been around a year or two, so uh, this is a tremendous opportunity. That and I also want to affirm this question of mutual aid. It was sporadic before, but with the pandemic and with the um, again the rebellions, the springing up of some form of mutual aid has gone on everywhere. Right now, in we're seeing the formation of the Chicago Union of the Homeless, and I'm aware now of a number of different networks that have grown up for aid to the homeless, mutual aid. I'm not talking about not for profits that are giving money, but I'm talking about ordinary folks on the ground. And that's really important. And I'm done. And Steve, looks like you want to say something.
Steve is on stack.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. I think you are 100% on the mark. And I think that we are living in the best of times right now, and that the worst is ahead of us. The end of the year with the supplemental unemployment appropriation ending, with eviction deadlines going to be implemented come the beginning of 2021, with the food banks stretched to the limit.
Right.
I think we are just going. We're on the plains, and the mountains are ahead of us, and we're heading towards the mountains. It's like it's going to get bad, and we're going to look back at November, and when we're in February, we're going to look back to this as the best of times, as crazy as that may sound. And I humbly believe that. It's like I don't think it's an exaggeration. I just think that people are getting exasperated and not being able to find an outlet for their exasperation, and looking to the two political parties. They're going to find out that, hey, neither one of them gives a crap about you. You're on your own.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
But I'm sorry, go ahead, David.
They just had a sit-in, I guess, a couple of days ago at the DNC. AOC and the crew, I guess, or the squad.
Yeah.
And they were demanding, that there be a Green New Deal, Medicare for all, and our list of demands. And on the other hand, the conservative members of the Democratic Party are saying, don't mention the word socialism. It turns people off. And AOC and the squad said, hey, we won our elections because we were able to do the deep work. We went down and organized in the communities, and we got our votes. And you guys weren't doing a damn thing. You were relying on the old-fashioned Democratic Party money and advertisements and stuff. So I think in this new period, we're gonna see a lot of struggle within the Democratic Party and outside the Democratic Party, as well as coming from the right.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's not going to be like Obama. Everybody was so happy when Obama got elected, they went to sleep. It's not going to be that way this time.
Can't be. Definitely can't be.
Well, one of the things that I'm constantly grappling with, I mean, within the own spheres, how do we unite, right? I think educating is really important, and I know we're an organization of propagandists, but like people have hit on some practical things, like pushing for small businesses, moving for these programs that June was talking about. Um, you know, and for us, if it's this battle with for the elected school board, we're going to be hitting severe austerity measures. They could be going after people's pensions if they start to tax um, retiree income. Illinois is heading for I mean, it's not just Illinois, but this is just an expression of how the system is failing us, right? Um, so I think we're gonna have to figure out ways to really start to organize, because the union's not gonna win this by itself, right? We're gonna have to do what AOC has done: grassroots organizing, student organizing, you know, and yeah, but in doing it in creative ways. I was talking to Lou yesterday. I'm like, well, how could we move these politicians during a time of pandemic, right? Because we were talking about this idea about a strike, because we talked about that in our union too. This is how we're going to move the politicians. But then we went remote, so we were saying, well, how effective would it be to go on strike during this pandemic? You know what I'm saying? So I think these expressions where people get together and loot stores. I'm not for looting, but they're seeing that like this is one thing we can do. That's not really politically motivated. It's not the answer. But I think that also captures the expression of where people are at, the frustration. Um, I don't know. So that maybe do we? I really enjoyed this talk. I know that we talked a lot about different ideas, but just different like you know dialectical ideas all over the place. But I think it's been really, really, really excellent. To maybe talk about next steps, Lou, or maybe what
I
other.
think that's a good idea. Yeah, let's do that. You want to go ahead?
Well, I just wanted to know if there were other topics you may want to discuss in the future, perhaps, because we kind of wanted to keep this dialogue going, maybe once a month, Lou, something like that.
Yeah.
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 And, and anybody
What do
interested?
you all think? What do
Yeah.
you all think? Sort of like parting shots. What do
Yeah.
you all think?
So for Illinois, I'm thinking, I know that there are people from Colorado and Michigan on the call, and my apologies to you. But for people that are on here from Illinois, I want to suggest that we plan our meetings tied to the legislative agenda for Illinois, so that in our meetings, we can come up with things that we may be able to pull off to impact Illinois legislators, whether it's occupying the Capitol or doing some direct action to bring their feet to the fire.
Right. And I think that would be ideal to unite with 1600 for that, because we go to Springfield quite often, and to put pressure. Yeah, I think that's great. So that's awesome. So Illinois legislation. Um,
And I don't have their calendar. I don't know. I know that they're going to be in session again, and that they're talking now about doing different things with leadership. So it's a whole new world down there if Madigan goes.
that's right. That's right. What troubles me is they can't think of who's going to fill that seat. I'm like, come on.
It's going to be a woman.
Yeah.
It's going to be a woman. I can tell you that, because the women have led the effort to get rid of Madigan, and Deb Conroy has been one of the principals, and it's going to be a woman.
Okay.
And that's in our favor.
Somebody else have a topic idea?
I think it's just in terms of the progress of the elections, it will be interesting to see what happens December 14th on when the Electoral College meets.
Yeah.
So that will be interesting to follow. And of course, if the Electoral College certifies Biden as the president-elect, what the response is going to be from the White House at that point, and what measures we see in place or developing in place.
Okay.
But I think the question of protecting the will of the people is important to follow, and also to recognize that the will of the people is not going to be respected by the incoming administration, no matter who it is. So I think we have to follow both of those things. I think what Juanita said about her students, what June said about her students, I think is something that both, is a topic we need to continue to follow. The question of how you work in this kind of political system. I think, yeah, I'll shut up.
So a topic on how to involve groups like the students that aren't putting their faith in the Democratic Party or want like.
Well, I think what we want to do in these meetings, I think what we want to do is look at more strategic and for example, if we're going to try to engage with what those students are thinking about, we want to talk about what is the dynamic of the breakup of the Democratic Party, for example. We want some sort of educational understanding of that process. If what we're looking for is how to engage in the legislative process itself, as Steve was suggesting, then we want something that helps us along that line. And what does that mean, practically speaking?
Okay.
So I think that's kind of that's what I'm thinking of.
Just to throw a different idea out here.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. In Venezuela, they're experimenting with direct democracy. Urban areas and rural areas form communes, and they decide what their area needs. And they petition whatever legislative body there may be, or representative government body there may be, to get that for their community. And if they won't come forward, well, they say, we'll do it ourselves, just give us the money. And now they're forming a national body of communes, and then another national body, in addition to their Congress and their other legislative bodies, they're forming a national body of communes, which ties all these communes, rural, urban, together. So just in terms of the idea of self-help, if we could sort of organize that in a way, this is what our community needs, and organize our communities in that fashion, demand, this is what we want for our communities. And I don't know where it would go from there, but establish our own body for our communities, and somehow take that to the legislative bodies or the executive bodies or to whomever, so that we are more self-determined and it's more of a direct democracy. And maybe laying the foundation for, as the society develops and changes, and that way becomes a new body of governance in our society.
Yeah, that's
shadow
ideal.
government.
What's that, Steve?
I just said what David was speaking of sounds like a shadow government.
I was thinking
Where-
about like in England, the opposing party has a shadow government. And if we create, if we create our own damn shadow government, our own department, our own secretary of labor, our own secretary of this, our own secretary of that, and say, this is what we want, this is what we should have, that would be interesting too.
Yeah. Well, it sure would be a good thing to have for building the propaganda in the media.
Yeah, that's a fact.
Interesting.
I suspect that this is Lou. I think that to a certain extent, you see, to a certain extent, you see elements of that within the battles that the squad has raised from time to time. The whole, I mean, they've raised it in terms of actual legislation, but they've also raised it in terms of propaganda. So that's important to recognize. I don't see enough of that on the local level from the people that we have, but it's there too. Like around the Lori Lightfoot budget and stuff like that. I don't see enough of that, but it's there. It's beginning, and I think that's a good element. I think that's a really useful phenomenon to look at in terms of an educational presentation. I think the other thing that connects with that, of course, is the developing mutual aid networks that are making these demands upon the city. The homeless organizations, for example, are making demands that Lightfoot follow through on her pledge to provide housing, permanent housing for the homeless. Demands that I'm sure she's not going to follow,
Right.
but nevertheless, these are important questions. It's right about our closing time.
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to invite you to consider the League of Revolutionaries for New America. We have all different kinds of members, and we're just, Lou and I just a small segment of that. But also to continue to come to these events, and we're open to ideas if you want to have a different kind of event or different, like, no, I think this was good. That was a good start, and I think as conditions worsen, it'll be great to loop more young people in, right? And people
Yeah.
who are in these struggles. So I think this is a great start, though. And I don't know if you want to say anything else, Lou, but I posted our Facebook tour, the Learn in Chicago chapter. So that's where we're going to be advertising other things. But yeah, I didn't talk
Wait,
about. I've been in the organization since 9/11, and it's been great, in terms of and just grappling with ideas. I'm constantly learning, even though I'm a teacher. And one of the most wonderful things about the league is just the depth of knowledge that people come with, right? Down to earth, humble people, and it's just a great organization. Yeah, absolutely.
So just anybody who's interested, you don't have to say right now, but contact the person that you know here. And if you're interested in joining, just let us know. But in any event, come back for our next one, and we don't know yet when the next one will be, but figure sometime before Christmas,
Yeah.
and then in January, and we'll go from there.
Mhm.
So thank you all for being here and for contributing your thoughts and your comments. And we'll see you next time, right?
Thank you.
Nice
Thank
to
you
meet
very
you all.
much.
Thank you.
Yes, same here. Yes, thank you.
Juanita.
Good. Gracias,
Thanks.
Jesus.
Bye-bye.
You.
Bye-bye.
Adios. Um. Oh, I'm gonna stop the live stream.